Most people don't need any of it. None of it.
When wellness becomes something we buy rather than something we practice, we basically risk confusing consumption with transformation. At what point does helping people become exploitative of their insecurities? I think sometimes, though, we buy them to avoid the more difficult questions. They can't give you what a difficult conversation you've been avoiding will give you.
Taking ownership, taking responsibility. Don't expect someone to fix you, but don't expect them to do it first.
Harry, good to see you. Welcome back, my friend. Looking forward to diving into a conversation which actually intrigues a lot of our listeners. We've had a few people call in and talk to us on Instagram around about the monetization of wellness. And I believe you've been to a conference at HEALF, is that right? HEALF? So we'll dive into the topic.
I hope you're enjoying the heat. Yeah, I've largely stayed out of it today. I went out around midday and got myself an ice cream. I had a little swim in the sea earlier this morning after a spin session in a heated box, it seemed. But I've been away from the sun mostly over the weekend as well. And yeah, you're right. I was at a conference and I mean, I've been in this well-being space, as I would say, 15 plus years, where I developed the thought gym and the beat model and all these things. And I'm looking at things now and I'm getting amazed by, I know we've talked about it a little bit here and there, monetization of wellness and this differentiation as well between wellness industry, which I don't like as a word, and well-being and then health and longevity. And all of these are somewhat the same, but they intersect as well because there are different components. But I was at an event called HEALF, beginning HEAL, but then ending with an F. So HEALF, which I had heard of. I think my sister had bought something from their PEMF mat from their website about a year or so ago. And also when I was at another summit, the Health Optimization Summit, I think they'd sponsored a taxi that was running around with Gary Brecker in it on his first trip, I think, to the UK since his explosion. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it.
I've bought a few things from HEALF. I know it pretty well. I mean, they are I'll say very good. I would say rather frustrating. I wouldn't subscribe to any of their stuff. You get like 5 emails a day from them. I keep meaning to unsubscribe and you realize you've subscribed somewhere else and they'll pop in again. But to be fair, their product, it's a pretty wide-ranging offering they give you across the wellness program of nutrition and gadgets and all kinds of kit.
I didn't realize they only started around 2020 and the founders are just 2 brothers who are still only currently mid-20s, 25 years old.
Good for them.
And I think it's generating something like 100 million in revenue this last year. And the event itself honestly, I don't think I rated the event, if I'm honest, for various reasons. And it wasn't worth, in my view, the money that I spent. I got a bit of a discount going, but I bought a 2-day ticket, which supposedly got you into workshops, which it did, and priority access into some of the talks, which it largely didn't. And just the venue, I think, was not great. It was in a building on the Strand with things in different places, very crowded. I didn't like, but having said that, that was before I found out, how far they've come in just a short amount of time. And this is probably only, I think, their second event, if I'm familiar with it. But what was, I guess, prompted the call for today was that there's so many brands that are now monetizing on small aspects of well-being. And I'm also going to go to a conference next weekend called the Longevity Festival, which I've not been to before. And I went to the Health Optimization Summit last year, and then there are different ones across the wellness industry. Some focused on, I think, gadgets, biohacking, longevity, and the retail customer. But you have other corporate type events like the Health and Wellbeing at Work, which is at the NEC. And I've been to all of these ones. And they do look and feel very different. And it just amazes me how many different avenues you can go down when it comes to this health and wellbeing aspect. But the industry itself is such a huge, I think it's maybe 6.8 trillion last year across the globe, but still 225 billion or so in the UK.
Well, look, I mean, you and I are the right people to be pitching to. I tend to invest a lot of gadgets. You tend to invest in going to the conferences. So really the questions we want to raise, I'm guessing, or you want to raise, certainly the ones I'd want to raise on today's show are more around authenticity, accessibility, and the commercialization of health, and whether we need as much as being peddled. There's lots been put in front of us. And it's a bit like, I use this analogy. It's like going in, I think I've used it before on the show, but you go into Holland and Barrett or whatever your local vitamin store is, right? And every single thing you pick up will tell you on the bottle why it's going to optimize your health. In reality, though, we don't need all the things there. First, what you want to try and do really is understand where you're deficient. So I'd recommend sort of doing a blood test or whatever assessment it is to understand where you're deficient before you buy everything in the store. And it might go, okay, actually, Nick, you've got a deficiency in iron, zinc, and vitamin C, whatever. And in that gives you some direction to know where you need to be optimizing and where maybe you might need something rather than just buying everything in the store, because every single thing you pick up is going to tell you its health benefits. But in reality, it doesn't mean we need everything. So it can be quite hard to sort of spot the wood through the trees, especially when there's so many different gadgets, solutions. I've purchased a lot of these things. I know you have as well. I think my research prior to today's show said the industry is about 6.3 trillion. So splitting hairs between 6.8, 6.3, it's a lot of money. It's one of the fastest growing industries in the world. That's according to the sort of Global Wellness Institute, those stats. But it is growing at almost twice the rate of global economic growth. So, people are interested. It's why people listen to our show. It's why you and I discuss it. It is a conversation people want to have. But where do you get started? When you walk into that vitamin store, what would your advice be? I know I'm using that as a metaphor here, but where do we start?
Well, this is the thing, is that there was maybe 4,000 people going through the door that weekend and talks galore. And I think, for me, because I've been around the block quite a few times, I think that there was also, I wasn't going there to necessarily learn new things, although of course I did. But my overriding irritation, if you like, with this whole industry is that most people don't need any of it. None of it. It's just band-aiding over a massive gash, I think, a lot of the times, right? And there were people desperate for all the little giveaways that they were giving with the hydrogen waters and the peptides and the collagen things to supplement deficiencies that are largely going to be, not I'm saying rectified or whatever, but they're largely going to be useless when people aren't doing any of the other basics right. I think Dave Asprey, who is, let's say, the self-proclaimed father of biohacking, as having invented the word supposedly, and always claims in his talks to have been the first person in the world ever to sell anything online on the internet in the 90s. But I guess it's the first talk I saw him speak at where he was going a bit more into that basics of biohacking, right? And the natural light, the, sleep, all of these things, the basics. And I guess there wouldn't be an industry there wouldn't be a very profitable industry if people just did all the basic and everything. And I think it's two things. Like, one is that people are starved of education, or they're starved of knowing what it feels like to be a normal human, I think, because none of this stuff would have been needed 100 years ago. But also, I just can't help shake the impression that people are always looking for someone, even in this wellness industry, something to fix them. And
listen, we're in a culture of get rich quick, of you don't need a job, you can be an influencer, of, your phone will solve all your life's problems, whether that's health through apps, whether it's earning your fortune while you sleep, all these different things. I think the rhetoric's changed as well, right? We're seeing now, funny enough, I remember my wife being told by a coach, she was going through a really difficult time years ago and she needed support. She needed therapy probably, but she looked at a coach, and actually it was my recommendation to get a coach first because of my background. And the coach she spoke to was charging, should we say, a very expensive amount. But that's not to say that it's not reasonable based on the expertise that the individual was demonstrating. However, the way it was used to sell the coaching to Lucy was, bear in mind, she was at rock bottom in the moment, was you're worth it. Invest in this because you're worth it. I don't need your money, but I want you to invest in you. You're worth it. And I thought it was quite a sniper type trick that really played on the psyche, that said, if you don't invest in yourself, Lucy, you're compounding the problem. You're reminding yourself you're not worth it. It was a way of extracting cash. And I think even now, when you look at the way the industry's moving, all the things we're seeing written now and said are that wellness is an investment rather than a luxury now. This is an investment in yourself, which is why we're seeing younger generations now more than ever spending hundreds and thousands of pounds on health optimization apps, on supplements, way more than the generations that came through before, including ourselves, right? And you and I spend a fair amount on different things. But the key is doing it with awareness. We don't remunerate this show. We do it just to share knowledge and try and educate. I know you've got a book that goes out, but I haven't yet, and we do different things. And most of the content we share freely, so people can make their own, decisions on what they want to do. But I think if you go into the world of commercial health and commercial wellness, it's a shark pit, really. It's not as good as people think. It's underneath the hood. It's lots of people trying to sell stuff that sometimes it works, right? I'm not saying it doesn't. There's loads of good products, but you've got to go in with awareness.
And I think good intentions for a large part, and awareness, as we talk about, is key. A couple of things I want to touch on. One, I somewhat agree, and I think I write in my book this phrase, and I actually mentioned it to my sister, I think the other day, where I said, pay now, pay later. I think for her, the reason I was referring to it is because she had signed up to some guys coaching WhatsApp group, whatever. And it was very basic stuff, right? I think she's like low carb diet, but she's dropped or released about 7 kilos over the last few weeks. And it's good for her. And she was on the phone trying to convince her friend to do it. And saying, look, you should pay and get into the group, really. And I said to her, look, yeah, that's true. Because I always say, people that pay attention, people that don't. And when you get free advice, you treat it like that. When you get a free book, if I was selling my book to an individual for £10,000, I can guarantee they're going to read every last word of that.
You know my fridge story, right? I think I've said this before, where we tried to get rid of a fridge. We moved from Kent to St Albans years ago. Perfectly working fridge. We didn't need one. We have it in the house we're moving to. They left their goods. And we put it outside, free to anyone wanted it, and it didn't go. So I put 50 quid on it, and it got stolen that evening. Right? I just think, maybe it had been stolen anyway, but I always think it was stolen because I put a value on it.
Well, because, you put values on things. So I agree to some degree, right? When you pay and you invest in yourself, it is showing the universe and it's showing your subconscious as well that you are worth it. Right? The whole, what was there? Is it Tresemme or one of these brands? It's like, you're worth it. The whole,
you're worth because you're worth it. Yeah. The small print will say, 17 out of 23 people agree on their big study.
So I do get that. The other thing that I guess was somewhat in my mind when I was at this festival was it reminded me about 15 years ago where firstly, there weren't any of these things. There was maybe the Om Yoga show and a few other things. There was maybe like 20 events a year. Now there's 300 to 500 of these events a year. But it wasn't to do with that. It's like back 15 years ago, I was going to way more personal development events. And a few times after I'd gone to quite a few, I started volunteering to be, one of the helpers in various areas. And I remember going to one, I can't remember, I think it was called the NAC, National Achievers Congress. And we had people like Tony Robbins speak there, which was great. I got to sort of, not meet him, but I was maybe stood about a foot away from him behind stage at one point. Very tall guy, a few other people. But I remember at one point I was working on a desk where they were signing up people. I don't think I was particularly signing up people, but I was around that desk. And I was seeing people come in and they're literally got glazed eyes because a lot of these speakers are very good in their NLP, they're linguistic, they're almost like hypnotized people. And you see this with newbies, I would call it, in that industry. And I felt like I was seeing a version of it in this area where people are like in a bit of a daze and not being mindful, which is what we talk about a lot here, because I don't think any of this thing is good or bad, right? This trend, I'm all for it. I live wellness and well-being and all that. But I guess for me, I feel like they're not in their right minds a lot of the time when people are jumping into these things. And I guess one of the things that irritated me today a little bit is I saw a really polished ad for a particular band. It wasn't the Whoop, but it's one that purports no subscription, etc., but not to be more of a fitness tracker, but more to be of a longevity thing. And so less focused on automatic activity detection and all of that. But I think the thing that was prompted me to send it to a friend of mine who I stayed with last week, an old school friend who's getting back into shape. He's had actually a heart issue about a year or so ago. He's quite overweight as well, but he's dropped about 30 kilos, I think, using Ozempic. So that shows how much he was overweight because he's still reasonably overweight. But I sent it to him because it was saying, he could detect maybe potential heart attacks 2 to 6 weeks ahead and this and the other. And I thought, that would be good. I said, just check it out. I don't know much about it. Look into it. And then I started doing a bit more research about it today. And from what I can see, they've got very slick marketing. But from what I can understand and what I've researched, like the so-called scientists they have are just made up stock images of people. This guy, I watched a YouTube video and this guy was testing it against some generic brand that looks similar on AliExpress. And he bought both items, the named brand and the AliExpress one. They both, through the shipping tracking, came and went from the same places with the same stopover in Hungary and this and the other. The generic brand connected to the app of the expensive brand. They look the same. So it's basically they haven't really invested in any of the engineering.
No, they invest in what sells it.
And whereas I wear an Oura ring and I know this is not being made in China and it's, the research has gone into it from the those guys, and the Whoop as well, I think is good. But it just made me think, like, I was almost duped by it, and I'm still somewhat tempted to buy the Chinese versions, how that fares, because it was only 20. But it just irritated me that now people are being victims, I think, to marketing, and they're riding this wellness wave.
It's hard for us not to be a contradiction in terms when both of us, you're going to these conferences, you're recommending products, I'm buying these products. We have a real passion for wellness products, gadgets, things like that, right? So, I'm aware of the irony of us having this conversation. However, right, 1 in 5 adults at the minute suffer from some kind of form of anxiety. There's a real problem, an epidemic really of anxiety and fear sweeping through not just this country, but worldwide. There is a record amount of spending on products regarding wellness, whether that's trying to help with stress, trying to help with burnout, trying to help with loneliness, mental health challenges, right? So we're seeing an all-time high across all these things, and yet there's more products out there than ever to support some of those problems, and yet we've got a bigger, the crisis is worse than ever, which that's relatively ironic. So I think the question really is, like, going back to your earlier point, when wellness becomes something we buy rather than something we practice, we basically risk confusing consumption with transformation. And I think that you and I'm not saying we're better, but I am saying it's different. I'll buy a product, and whether I use it or get the best or extract the full value of that product, so it makes a difference, I don't know. But I think you and I are both very aware that the best solutions out there for mindfulness, for wellness, ultimately are nearly always free, but it doesn't sell. You can't get a conference. People are going to turn up to you. They've got nothing to sell to you when you arrive. We all know the sun is good for us. We know sleep is good for us. We know, eating organic, healthy, varied foods are good for us, but it doesn't sell. So it's getting the balance right. It's how do we, you and I, through this show, in my opinion, not push people away from buying these things, because we're both consumers, but how do we get them to do it with that level of awareness that doesn't exacerbate the problem and get people confused with consumption? They think, I bought this stuff, therefore I'm going to be better, with what true transformation is. Because really one needs to support the other. It shouldn't replace it. And I think we're sometimes with this instant fix we get on Instagram and TikTok, and buy this product and you'll instantly be able to detect this, do this, feel this. That's great, but it has to be alongside, as you'd always see in the old adverts, a very nutritious diet, right? Whatever it is, you've got to do it alongside the things that really transform you. And I think that bit of the message isn't being pushed.
Yeah, I think challenge with it all is not so much the things themselves. Like I said, I've got the Oura Ring, I've got a Garmin, I've got infrared light panels, all of these things, great. I think the challenge is where I feel like the vast majority of people, especially beginners who are entering this wellness space, they need a lot less of those things. But that being said, I just find that life and the universe is full of paradoxes. As Peter Drucker says, right, you can't manage what you don't measure. And so measuring things is useful. I guess it's more that
it is, but just to jump in on that a little bit, it's like RPE though, right? Perceived rate of exertion. That is still a measure, but we don't need necessarily a watch, although I have one, to tell us how hard we're working. Intuitively, we have our own internal measures as well.
Yeah.
So you can still measure to a degree, even with or without that stuff.
Yeah, the challenge, I suppose, with that thing, and I remember there's an interesting quote that I always think about, which I can't remember who asked, maybe it was a reporter, was asking Muhammad Ali how many sit-ups he can do. And he said something like, I don't know, I only start counting when it hurts. And the challenge, in a way, I like that idea, because also it wasn't about really measuring how many sit-ups you can do, because obviously maybe when you're starting out, it hurts after 50, but years, it hurts after 250. But it's more about how many you can go beyond that, because then that's more of the mental fortitude. And actually, I want to tell you a bit of the story about this weekend and mental fortitude in a second. But it's just that your rate of subjective measure changes so much, right? So your rate of perceived exertion it might be a 7 now and might be a 7 in 2 years' time, but it's a different 7. So I think there's a place for objective quantification as well as subjective analyzation, I suppose. But, in terms of that little story I was going to tell, I went to a couple of workshops. As I said, this ticket included workshops and a lunch and whatever. Quite good. A mobility guy, a strength guy. And the session was around stillness and stability. So as he was explaining, right, muscles tend to do 3 things, right? They can contract, they can extend, or they can hold still effectively. And so this exercise was all about holding still. And I've got to say, my mental toughness, and I was unfortunately wearing my vest top, which has like a thought gym mindset. So I felt like, and I was also at the front of the class, I felt like
you felt under pressure.
One of the exercises, or not exercise, the holding poses was a lunge, but both knees are exactly 90 and 90, with maybe an inch above the ground for the knee that's lowest to the ground, and holding that for 1 minute on one side, then 1 minute on the next side, then back to the first side for a minute, back to the right. Incredibly hard, right? 3 on each side. And honestly, I think he felt it after the second one because he gave us a little bit more of a rest and was giving us a bit of motivational talking. And it was interesting because he was saying that, it's all right to fall out of it and just collapse out of it, but don't, you tend to want to give up before your body actually and it's all about focusing on the breath and all of that. I really like that. But so that just reminded me to do with the quote about that mental fortitude rate of perceived, exertions. Like, now I can hang off the bar for a minute way easier than I could.
It's the David Goggins bit as well, isn't it? You've got,
Yes.
we can go 70% deeper than we think we can, or whatever it is.
Yes. I think where I'm going with is firstly, right, from a wellness perspective and business of wellness is exploded, right? And it doesn't show you any signs of going backwards. And that's fine. And that's great. And like I said, you and I, or me more specifically, I attend these events, espousing a lot of these wellness practices. I guess what it comes down to is really what fundamentally, like you and maybe I and probably you teach is awareness and mindfulness. And it's where I feel like a lot of people at these things not doing it like that. They want the solution. They want the guru on stage to tell them this, and then the fancy product. And I'm like, and to be fair to a lot of the speakers, there's a bit more of a veered away from optimization and products and, more to like free things. There's always mentioned. It's just that for most people, it goes over their heads and they want the fix.
I mean, there's a counter argument to my point I made earlier regarding the coach went to Lucy, you're worth it. If you don't invest in you, you're going to exacerbate the problem. I didn't like that approach. It obviously works for this individual to win clients, but there is a counter argument I'm sure they would make. They didn't. But if I was in their shoes and I was thinking of a counter argument, it'd be, well, if that wellness practitioner or that coach can change someone's life, should they feel guilty about the fees they charge and the way they go about charging them? I can understand that point as well. And then there's obviously a different coach for everybody. I didn't like that exploitative approach, but I think that's where the question sits at the heart of all this really is, at what point does helping people become exploitative of their insecurities? Because we're all arguably the most insecure we've ever been, certainly in the Western world. There's insecurities about everything because everything is magnified, everything's on social media, every second picture you see is someone else's perfect life, which of course is often a reminder that ours isn't. We're faced with those reminders every single day of our lives on social media. A lot of these apps are encouraging us to spend even more time on our phones. There's an irony there where all these health and wellness apps, which is booming, you and I know that actually being on your phone for the amount of time that the average person is spending now isn't healthy, whether you're on a wellness app or not. But equally, if you're really struggling with certain things, maybe that's the short-term fix to help you make a better life practice. I think it's a really hard thing to navigate. And I think that's why you and I are definitely, why I say I'm a contradiction here, because I buy some of these products. I think sometimes, though, we buy them to avoid the more difficult questions. I know, obviously, I'm really obsessed with fear and how people challenge those things. But let me give an example. I've seen more retreats being advertised now than anywhere. Maybe that's the algorithm on Instagram, but I'm seeing every second thing I get is another wellness retreat. And these are 3, 4, 5,000 quid. I think I shared one with you recently, didn't I? A commercial one, which I thought was ridiculously priced. But a £5,000 retreat, no matter whether you've got cold baths and saunas and all those different things that might be there, they can't give you what a difficult conversation you've been avoiding will give you. Sometimes we need to look deeper and go, yeah, it's good, and we can have that rest and recuperation, which a lot of people do need. But equally, a lot of people will spend that money to avoid something that can be solved right away, and it's completely free. And sometimes those anxieties sit with that conversation we haven't had, with that insecurity we don't have, the relationship that's keeping us small. So we run and we hide and we get a temporary fix because we've had that rest and recuperation. We've had that time away from the person or the individuals or the family or the problem that is in our lives for a short period of time. But then we come back and we're faced with it again. And I just think sometimes, as you mentioned right at the start of this recording, they're band-aids. Like, a lot of the real challenges we need to overcome are actually free. We've just got to identify what they are, lean on your buckets. Look at the book you created, right? The Thought Gym. It's the community bucket, the sleep bucket, the energy. A lot of these things are free. You can be optimized. You can get there faster. So I know with my muscle recovery, I don't need all the gadgets, but sometimes I'll try and accelerate it so I can get back on the road a bit quicker. It won't be any surprise to you that I get injured more than ever before now. Maybe sometimes I rush it too much and therefore break down a little bit quicker.
you probably, yeah, I mean, it's all about at this age, mobility recovery. I mean, this is what this guy was talking about. He was younger than me. I guess it might have been your age. He was 42. But I mean, going back to your coach and your wife and everything else, I was thinking about something similar earlier today because I was thinking about my sister, and I'm not sure who the friend was that she was talking to on the phone, but I remember she has another friend who I do know very well. And she was asking me some stuff because she obviously gave birth to her second child a couple of years ago. She was always very slim, but she has put on a fair amount of weight and everything. And I think she was contemplating it. Other people have been spoken to me about contemplating these, GLP-1 drugs and everything else. And I was thinking to myself earlier, I'm not sure exactly how much they cost, but they cost quite a lot, right? Yeah. Every month, you're injecting yourself for what might be forever, it seems, because coming off it has got a whole host of problems. And they're developing a pill, which will again be even better for them from an ongoing subscription point of view. But I was thinking, okay, but if I'm a mindset coach and I can, get to the root of, because, those GLP-1s are doing something on a physiological level to stop you having the appetite, but, they're not really working on a mental level. It can be a byproduct of being on that, of course, because it takes the noise away. But let's say that spending £2,000-3,000 a year on these GLP drugs. You're going to help someone quit smoking, right? There's lots of hypnotists that can help people quit smoking, the Alan Carr way to quit smoking, all of these things. And you think, okay, I'm buying 20 cigarettes a day over 10 years. How much is that costing me? Let's say, I don't know, 15, 20,000 pounds, maybe 30,000 pounds over that 10-year period. So actually, if I'm someone that's going to help you resolve that, I could charge 10 grand because you're still going to save 20 grand or whatever the thing might be. And so there's value in that. And also you need to, know your own value as someone that's helping people, because ultimately, like I said, I was talking to the guy the other day who was doing the mobility stuff, the 42-year-old, and he was talking about his mum, 72 years old, sits around all day, smokes. And I didn't say this to him, but I wanted to sort of say it to him. And it's a phrase I love when I think I mentioned it to my sister the other day, because she's obviously paying this WhatsApp group thing. Yeah. And I'm like, you're just doing things I've told you, right? But you can't be a prophet in your own land. And I thought that because here I am listening to this guy. His mum's got access to him for free, of course, but she's not going to listen to that. I mean, obviously she's got her own inbuilt habits and everything else, but should she want to change, she would probably do better paying some random qualified coach trainer, £1,000, £2,000 than getting that advice from her son, which might give her even better advice. Yeah. Just is, like I said, people that pay attention, people that don't. I find there's a whole dichotomy in my head, and then there's this 1 foot in, 1 foot out, which is maybe not a good thing, maybe a good thing, where I both love and hate that part of the industry. And like I always preach, a lot of the stuff is free. The paid stuff is useful. I just think that 90% of the people buying the paid stuff just need to use the free stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go back full circle. I mentioned the vitamin store earlier, although I mentioned the brand name, I didn't mean to, but I did. But I think it's a bit like the self-help junkie idea, right? So you and I, you've written a book, I'm writing a book. So we're going to get oxymoron. We're going to be contributing to the point. Self-help books are great. They're fantastic things that can help people overcome a whole array of obstacles, whether you're dealing with burnout, stress, want to optimize your health. You've written a couple of books. They're fantastic. I believe quite strongly in myself, and you may almost challenge me if you disagree. And we've both been on similar journeys where we really dive deep into coaching, wellness and literature and authors and all these things. But there has to be a point, I think, where you need to break away, because you become what I would call like a self-help junkie, in the sense that everything you read reflects a shortcoming. So if you're reading something, there's going to be something in there that reminds you that you're not good enough, reminds you that there's a way of optimizing your life, and it's a never-ending story, right? So the same, I think, is true in the fitness and health situation. You and I could go into health, or whatever it was you went the other day at the conference, and there's no way we can't go in there and find something that could probably optimize our lives a little bit better. And we're reminded that we don't have that thing. And the way the human mind works is we focus on the negative. We focus on what we don't have rather than what we do. So we focus on the gadget we don't have. I'm terrible for this, by the way. And forget the fact we've got sunlight outside that, is free in abundance. I focus on things I don't have instead. And I need this gadget, or I'll never get fit, or I'll never get healthy. And is the health industry, in a way, in its current guise, is it helping people become healthier? Or is it just creating a new standard, which is actually relative, particularly for the younger generation, almost impossible to live up to? Because that's how they're going to continue to make their money, because it's like an impossible standard. And I think for you and I, we've purged cash at different stages in our lives or conferences. There are points where we go, I think I've pretty much got everything now for that element of my life. I'm going to stop for the moment. I'll go back when I want to do something else or I think something else is deficient.
This is exactly the thought I was having yesterday in the toilet, right, at the conference. And again, I have this dichotomy in my head because I remember years ago, I was seeing this coach and I was talking about the books I was reading. I think he was saying, I don't need any books now. It's like, I know what I need to know. And he recommended a final book to me. I think it was like Choose Easy World or something like that. It was quite good. And I remember hearing Jack Canfield, who wrote the Chicken Soup for the Soul series of books that sold billions. And he was talking about speed reading and how when he first got into it, he's just trying to consume. But then he's like, no, let's hold back. And I'm of that ilk now around us. Like, I'm not so bothered about consuming. And also, I did hear a really good speaker the other day, and I need to investigate him more. And I think you'd like him as well. A guy called Peter Crone.
I know Peter Crone. Yeah.
Okay.
Really good. He's been trying to write his book, by the way, for about 12 years. And I don't think he's published it yet. He's been trying to write it. He speaks wonderfully.
And I got really well.
I'm going to just highlight it because I didn't realize this at the time. I heard him on a podcast, immediately went to Amazon, bought a book by Peter Crone. Don't buy it. It's not by Peter Crone. It's an AI piece of drivel. I only know that because I heard him on Davina McCall's podcast, which is another brilliant podcast, by the way. And he was on there and he was talking about how he's been for 12 years, been writing this book and he's just never got to publishing it. But yeah, I really, really recommend him. But just Google on your podcast platform, Peter Crone, find some of the interviews he's done. He speaks very well.
To him. And a lot of the speakers that I resonated with most at the weekend.
Was he at the conference? So he was a face. I'd love to have met him. That'd been good.
A fireside chat rather than a talk.
Nice.
But very funny. He speaks very eloquently. UK guy, which might also be why I feel like I resonate.
No, he's good. He's really good.
More than, say, the US speakers and whatever. But one of the penny drop moments for me, and I've had this penny drop moment before, but I just heard it repeated at the weekend, was that the people that seem to resonate really well with everybody, I feel, like the Peter Crones, and there's another guy after him, and are the people that are telling you stuff that you already know, because that stuff resonates with you. You're like, yeah, that makes sense. And then it made me reflect even more and it kind of led me into reflecting on my psychedelic experiences and booth experiences where there's just a certain knowing that go through those experiences. I've always had a certain kind of knowing, I think from the age of about 10, about just the universe. I can't explain it to you right now, but there's just a certain comfort or knowing, right? Even though like bad stuff happens, right? I lost a parent, but there's a certain...
like an agnostic spirituality that there's
a certain comfort of a universal blanket around me or whatever. But these experiences I've had where, I just, especially that last booth experience where on the highest level of reality I went to was beyond souls and spirits, which one of the other speakers was talking about, and why we're here to learn these lessons, because the soul has all these lessons to learn. And that's true. But the soul and the spirits come from still a lower dimensional reality than the uppermost level in my understanding of my experience. But anyway, we know everything. And I was thinking to myself, I already know everything I need to know. And so I don't need the more information. But then I was thinking to myself, but do I know that because I've had the experiences I've had up to now, which means I needed to invest the 10, 50, 100,000, whatever I've invested in personal development over the last 20 years and all these events, because it's led me to now know that I already know what I need to know. And I know that I'm going to learn more from a literal point of view, but inherently it's about having an inner knowing, a bit like even with the Aura Ring, right? Where I can tell you what my number will be within +or -5 before looking at it, right? There's instinctive knowing. And so I was thinking like, okay, so I don't need any of these things because I already know, and I already enough, and I already know this.
By the way, I think that's a great thing.
To get to that point as well.
I think it's a great thing. It's been a hell of a journey for you to get to that point. I think that's where people, whether they admit it to themselves or not, probably want to get to, right? I think it's interesting I was reflecting as you were talking about my own practices. It will be different for everyone who listens to this show, different for you probably than it's for me. But 9 times out of 10, when I'm buying gadgets, for want of a better word, health-based products, unless I'm training for something very specific and niche, like an Ironman event or whatever, but in day-to-day, it's actually often when I'm at my lowest. I'm having a low moment, mental health, or I'm anxious about something or whatever. So as the way that the world is, I almost, without knowing it consciously, subconsciously, I'm probably looking for a quick fix in some way or another, right? So that's when I buy stuff. It gives me that retail high of I've purchased something to distract my attention sometimes on something's going to optimize my health. I would like to think I've relatively got my shit together. So, but maybe the younger generation still don't. There's a lot of angst in the younger generation about where they're going. And I think when you are unsure, it's very easy to be persuaded to buy things. But also we look for distraction in other things as well, just to occupy our minds, just to occupy our attention. This is why we have all this doom scrolling, where our attention needs to be occupied, or we don't know how to handle the silence. Years ago, you said at the start of the show, years ago we didn't need all this stuff. But there was a lot of comfort in the silence. There was comfort in darkness before we had electricity. Right? We have comfort where we are. We learn not to have it when other things become available. And I think that we're not going to be able to change the wellness industry. We know it's worth trillions. It's probably going to continue to grow at the rates that we discussed earlier. But actually, the things that really create lasting well-being, I guess this is the Mindful Past podcast, real lasting mindfulness, real lasting health, wealth, and from a health perspective, it can't really be purchased. It's stuff that we practice. And that's the stuff which is kindness, relationships, community, purposeful work. I always talk about, as you know, I've said it many times in this show and I'll say it again, my favorite Chinese proverb, which is, I want to be happy for a year, inherit a million, and happy for a lifetime, give back to others. That purposeful work. Physical movement. You move every day in the shower, you have a routine in the morning. I try to move every day, but also rest. But also highlight this now because you mentioned it a moment ago where you said, I don't know if I need to, I'm happy or I'm content with the level of knowing that you have. That's the courage to be fully present with where we are in our lives and the courage to move forward at that level without always having to seek more. Yeah. And I'm not quite where you are in that yet, but I think I can feel excited for you if you're further ahead in that journey. I think that's a really good thing. It doesn't mean we're not open to exploration. It doesn't mean we're not open to learning, but
I don't want listeners to walk away thinking, Harry has got to this age and he's like, I know it all and that's it. No, that's not really what I'm saying. I guess it's that I'm comfortable with the knowledge I have to this point.
That's how I interpreted it, by the way.
Certain knowing without knowing, like I don't need to constantly think about the air that I'm breathing to know that I'm going to be able to take a breath, right? Because I've had periods in the past, don't get me wrong, where it was probably the most scariest period in my life where I wasn't able to breathe. But on a day-to-day, right, we're not thinking about the air that's around us and breathing it in so much. And it's just, there's a subconscious knowing that it's all good from that perspective for most people who haven't got, obviously, breathing issues. But I'm open and my physical body and mind is going to learn more information as I get older, of course, right? Like there's a person who's the same
more on the lines of
as they are 40 has wasted the last...
At the moment, I think the health industry is taking advantage of the people that go, if I don't do this, then this will happen. If I don't do this, then this. If I don't do this, then this. If I don't buy this, then this. If I don't have this supplement, then this. Whereas I think what I'm trying to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, because it was your statement, I'm just reading into it because it's probably where I want to get to. It's the idea of going, I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if my joints are going to hold out. I don't know if I'm going to get some debilitating illness or disease or whatever. But I live my life with enough knowing and enough awareness to say if those things happen, they happen. But I've done the right things to feel like I've, I guess, offset as much as I can. And I don't have to live every day by going, well, this could happen. If I don't do this, I'm going to get cancer. If I don't have this every single day, I'm definitely going to get cancer. One in two people will get it. So I need to do it. It's like, look, I eat healthily. I exercise. It can strike independently whether you do, whether you don't. And that's okay. If it does, I'll deal with it when it comes. And I'll probably go back into the research at that moment. I always remember, I've read this, but it's quite a well-known quote. It's like, we have all these desires and wishes and wills, but when you're unwell or unhealthy, you only have one. Right. Yeah. So,
Yeah, I think, and it's kind of a little bit to echo a bit what Peter Crone was talking about on the weekend. And I've said it many times to both groups and individuals, but he said it maybe a little bit more eloquently. And I need to listen to more of his stuff so I can articulate my own ideas in such a great way. But it's all coming from the mind anyway, right? Mindful past, right? You're talking about a future that doesn't yet exist, that is being created by a present that you've decided to create. So by having the thought about the cancer, the whatever, that didn't exist and still doesn't exist, except for in the moment that you've created now. But had you not created that moment, you'd be looking at a different path, because I don't want to say it's all in your head, right? But it is. I
thought it's the most powerful thing in the universe,
the future, right? Or, I can't point to them. They don't exist. I mean, we get all esoteric now with, what is reality and now and time and everything else. But it's worth exploring these ideas. I was just on with ChatGPT earlier, asking it to kind of pull a list of conferences that I might actually speak at. Well, I know I'm talking about wellness and bashing some of this conference idea, but ultimately my purpose in life, I believe, at least currently, is to share what I've learned with as many people as possible. So that's one avenue to do that and get the word out. But as I was doing that, I was uploading all my previous books, a couple of two 2 of the 4 books, I guess, I've written, but also my speaker one-pager and some bios and all that. And one of the advantages I feel like I do have over a well-being coach or a corporate wellness coach, or even these speakers that are on stage a lot of the time, and I know we all have eclectic but varied backgrounds, is that diversity from, scientific realm, astrophysics, particle physics, quantum physics, to, exercising in a physical way for the last 40 years, to getting a first class degree, to, being in the wellness space. I mean, we're all unique and we all have our unique gifts to bring. And I think that's my USP, as it will be for you and anyone listening, is to find out, we all might have the same information, but we don't have the same experiences. And those experiences shape how we interpret the information that we receive, and then how we disseminate that message to other people. And so that's my uniqueness, right? Is my history, and pulling those things together, and also being able to see the threads that are common across various seemingly random topics. So yeah, I think, well, what I would say with people, and kind of going back to where we started with the conversation about the future of wellness and the wellness industry as a whole, is on the one hand, I do agree that having it more out there is great. What I feel like is that I feel that a lot of people, even ones spearheading some of these movements, right? These guys that created HEALF, great. They're 25 years old. They're going to know so much by the time they're 45. But I often I've seen a panel, and there was a longevity woman. And I was Googling people as I was listening to them, saying, should I be listening to this person or not? And, I don't know, they've been on the block for 8 years. She's still early 30s and talking about living to 150. Great. But I also want to talk to the person who's 75 and 95, who looks 30 years younger.
105.
Yeah. Who looks 30, 40 years younger, rather than,
That's a good example. I love that example. It's probably a good way to round it off, because as you say, right, you can give all the hacks now, and until she's lived to 105, we don't really know if there's anything in it or not. We can make assumptions and guesses and hypotheses. But what I do know is, for the majority of those that have lived over 100 that I've heard talk, right, whether that's in short statements or on TV interviews or whatever, they nearly always, and correct me unless you've heard anything different, credit their longevity to love, to kindness, to experience, to exploration, to community, to physical exertion, being outside and movement. I've never heard it attributed particularly to any, thing that's beyond the realm at the moment.
The last one I'd say is less so. But I would say definitely community, definitely having purpose in nature. But I think the one that resonates most, you didn't talk about it, and is a hard one, not necessarily hard one for me, but is not holding on to things, grudges, irritation. So actually, I want to tell you a quick story about what happened on Saturday morning. So there was a queue to get into the event, and one of our friends had got there a little bit before us, or maybe significantly before, like 15, 20 minutes. And so was nearer the front of the queue. And so he allowed us to come in. And there was like 3 of us coming in, right? He was by himself. There was 4 of us in total. 3 extra people came into the queue. The woman behind went off like a lot. And was like, I'm going to tell them that you come to the front. You should be coming to the front. I send my friends to the back, blah, blah, blah. It was, I understand people might get irritated, all this. It wasn't that. It was more that there was this inner trauma there.
Yeah, for sure. I know where you're going with it.
It's a reflection of inside job. And also the experiences that you have in this life are, if you believe the kind of some of the ideas where the soul effectively, and I was listening to a podcast the other day, interestingly, the neuroscientist from the Big Bang Theory, Mayim Zalek, something like that. She just has some really good conversations recently. I recommend checking her out, from consciousness levels to UAP and UFO levels. But she was talking about, the soul, and a lot of people, how when they die, they have like a life audit, and then the soul comes back and the memories get washed, and you choose what you want to learn in this life. Right. So you come back and you meet the people, the experiences that are there to teach you something. And so I was thinking, this woman's got a lot going on. And the fact that she's getting so irritated, no one else did, just her. Right. And it didn't matter that when she did tell on us, as it were, that they were saying to her, okay, look, let's sit them to the side. You can go in front of them. And she didn't care about that. She didn't want to win. She wanted to hurt, quote unquote, hurt us. Right. And I appreciate seeing like you jump in and whatever else, but it wasn't about that so much. It was about her reaction, right? It's never the thing. It's always the reaction to the thing. I was thinking, there's so much inner work like needs to happen. And I see this myself, right? If I'm interacting with someone and they're irritating me, it's a phrase from NLP that I remember from years ago. If you spot it, you've got it. So if I'm spotting it and seeing it in someone else, or I'm being quote unquote triggered by that person in some way, what is the thing that I need to learn that won't trigger me in the future? Because if you and I were standing next to each other and we both had the same interaction with a person.
One of the most common things we've said on this show, right, between the two of us is nothing means anything but the meaning we give it.
Yeah, of course.
What we do know is the minute you jumped in, and this is true for all humans and we'll have different stories, but for her mind started telling stories over and over based on her experience, nurture, nature, all those things. She started running a narrative in her head, and we can create those narratives faster than Netflix, right? It's really quick. She's having stories about who the hell are you? This has happened to me before. This guy's an arsehole.
She also said this wouldn't have happened. Like, it's just, you're letting them through because they're like 3 white guys or something like that. She was white as well, but she was like,
yeah, I mean, but the narrative, she's just, head is just full of stories, right? It's full of stories and they need to come out. And, you know, the good thing is here is rather than get agitated, it sounds like you showed a bit of compassion for you. And you know what? Whether you explained it to her or not, in your head, you've gone,
I mean, to be fair,
because she's got all this stuff going on.
My friend,
that's a lot to deal with for anybody. If you get that upset, she's obviously going through some tough shit or has been through.
Oh yeah,
let's have compassion for it because you can't change it in a key jump.
I have this experience where I need to step away from things where you can't. I don't want to call her crazy, right? But I'm using this as a metaphor in a way. But you can't be rational when you're talking to a crazy person, right? And you need to match them, and I don't want to match that person a lot of the time. Even like yesterday, I was on the phone to my mum. And it was a conversation where she was, I guess, offloading to me about another interaction she had. But I'm like, I don't want that. I need to detach myself from this. I'm not going to get drawn into making someone else's problem my problem. I'm not saying that it was my mum's problem, but the other person's problem that she was talking about.
I get it.
I'm like, not interested. But actually, just to wrap it up, I think I wanted to talk about one interesting thing that happened on Friday. I was at the Biohacking Centre in London Bridge that, if you're ever in that area, let me know and tell you where to go. So a friend of mine is...
I know where we talked about the new centre. Yeah,
philosophy, and it's a great place. But one of the devices my friend was having me try the other day was a bit of a weird one. I need to look into it. But it was effectively reading each of your fingers. So you put your finger in this weird contraption and it would read your, not biofield, but some kind of field. And it would look at aspects of your body and have a little wheel and see if you're aligned, and even your chakras and how aligned your chakras are. And he was actually really surprised by my stuff because he was going, I've not seen really anyone who's done quite a few scans all aligned up like that. And I was thinking, it's interesting because some of my practices have dropped over the last few years, like from twice daily meditation to whatever else. But I feel like at some level, and I feel like there's still obviously loads to work on, but at some level, there's an alignment that's been hit and it's created comfort. And so that, I don't know if that's the stress point that I was talking about before, is where people who have reached old age, they don't hold on to that stress. They forget. I'm not nowhere near there, but I feel like there's been somehow enough work done to allow a certain level of equanimity, I guess, or release or whatever, until the next challenge happens. Because obviously, if we believe in the sole purpose is to come here and learn lessons, your life is going to constantly throw you challenges so that you can overcome them, learn how to deal with them until the day you transition to the next place. So yeah, I don't know. It was an interesting thing. I'll send you the report because you actually get a PDF report and everything. It's quite interesting.
Send over. I'll be intrigued to have a look at it.
Yeah, I will do.
You become a consumer. We've gone full circle. The consumer of the new health craze, which is now reading chakras, potentially. I'll see the report. But look, I think you and I are both fully aware that we attend these things, we buy these things, we are walking potential contradictions. But I think ultimately, we just want more people to do it with awareness, right? Like question.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Challenges first. And where are you deficient? Do you need anything at all? Have you done the basics first? Are you eating healthily? Are you getting sunlight? Are you getting sleep? If you're feeling down, are you doing the right things which are within your control first? And if you're not, then maybe you need some additional intervention, and that's great. But then don't use it as a quick fix. Don't go and spend $5,000 on a retreat rather than avoid, as I mentioned earlier, that difficult conversation, because you'll come back and you'll still have to have that difficult conversation.
Yeah, and I think that's it. I think the main thing for me is about taking ownership, taking responsibility. That might involve the use of tracking devices and attending well-being events and everything else. And that's great. The thing is, like anything else, it's about, don't expect someone to fix you, not that you're broken, but let's assume that you believe you are, is learn to help yourself, right? And the rest of the world will help you for sure, but don't expect them to do it first.
Funny enough, it's going to be the subtitle for my book, which is Blood, Sweat and Fears from Anxiety to Agency. So we'll see how that goes. Anyway, right, really good to catch up, buddy. I'd have liked to have gone to that conference, to be fair. I'd have enjoyed it. I probably would have come away with lots of goods purchased, knowing me after all that.
You're not up to London in the next week? Because I've got...
No, I was actually there on Friday just for the day, but I was in and out. I went to F1 simulators and that was good fun with a team building thing. But otherwise, I'm back home now. So that was
okay.
Good.
Otherwise, there's one on Friday and Saturday that I'm going to attend.
No, sadly not. But I'm conscious of our listeners' time. So good chat. The monetization of wellness. I think a few things for people to have a think about. And yeah, maybe you and I can book in a conference in the future, can plan to be there and we'll go along together. It'd be fun.
Yeah, excellent. All right, buddy.
All right,
have a good
Take care.
Take care.
You too, mate. All the best.